Ohamita kepi Dayanya hipie Ishta zinawi amakiapie Washitu ia Rebecca Mousseau amakiapie Na mini waka o yanke hamataha na mini shota edwati na wakan tipi awayan kapi hektawani na Dakota wichoha tag oash awayanka na kuahed hektawani. Hello, relatives. My Dakota name is Ishtazinawi, Yellow Eyes Woman. My English name is Rebecca Mousseau. I am the Dakota Lifeways Programs Manager for Wakantipi Awayangapi. Welcome. It's so good to have you here tonight. Welcome to our Summer Gifts of the Plant Nation webinar featuring ƞpsiƞna. Pidamayan, thank you all for being here today. Also, thank you to the U.S. Forest Service for partnering with us for our seasonal webinar series. Before we begin, we've enabled live captioning if you need, which you should be able to enable on your Zoom settings for Zoom participants only. If you have additional questions, there will be a Q&A at 7 after both of our presenters. Also, at the end of the webinar, we will be having, we'll be sharing a survey reminder at the end, and we appreciate your feedback. If you have an extra few minutes to spare when it's over, the survey feedback helps us reflect and plan for meaningful and impactful programming in the future. So your feedback is very much appreciated. Again, please hold on to your questions, write them in the chat on Facebook Live or in the chat on the Zoom webinar, and we will get to them at the end after our speakers. Our speakers tonight, next slide, please. Also want to shout out our tech support behind the scenes, Louisa and Katie. Thank you guys for being so awesome and helping us make this happen today. Our speakers tonight are Ruth Cedar Face and Gabby Menomin. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to introduce Ruth Cedar Face. She is an enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota Nation. Her Lakota name is Nagi Ksapawi, wise spirit woman. Professionally, Ruth is a licensed addiction counselor and has 32 years of work experience in the substance abuse and mental health fields, working with adolescents, adults, and families. Ruth's heart work is with traditional plants and foods. She's been a lifelong learner of traditional plants and she's been a lifelong learner of traditional plants and foods. She had spent many summers with her ƞpsiƞna and her inake, harvesting and preparing traditional foods for the summer ceremonies, in the hard times in the winter, and everything in between. Ruth believes that all traditional plants and foods are medicine and connections to our spirit and to those relatives who passed on. She also believes that the traditional foods and plants are healing for the body, mind, emotions, and spirit. Ruth shares her knowledge openly when requested so that the teachings can continue into the future generations. Ruth lives in the community of Pahisinte on the Pine Ridge Reservation, also known as Porcupine, South Dakota, with her 2 sons, Sam and LJ, and her partner, Sean. I'm going to turn it over to Ruth now.
Rebecca, it's good to be here with everybody tonight. Dona ya hipiki ea chante washterna pechu zapiksto. Washichu ya Ruth Cedar Face machiapi na hala komi chajeki na gik sapome machiapiksto. So I come from Porcupine and I've lived here for probably most of my life, but I think I'm like the seventh generation from my family that settled here on my mom's side of the family. So in this community, I'm pretty much probably know everyone and I'm probably related to everyone. And so I spent a lot of time, doing different things around here with my family. I remember following my mom around and she would carry a stick and she would harvest chanakpa off the trees, the tree mushrooms, and we would go up in the hills and dig ƞpsiƞna or look at different things. And so it's always been a part of my life. And so tonight I'm really honored to be asked to share information with you on the ƞpsiƞna or ƞpsiła, as we call it down here in Pine Ridge. So um, I just want to thank you guys for being able to, for being able to be here with you and share what I have, what knowledge I do have. So today I want you to, I'm going to kind of give you some information on ƞpsiła, the different names, harvesting times. It's real interesting because the harvesting times I know are kind of different these days. There's some nutrition information that I've been able to find out about ƞpsiła because it's really a really nutritious food, but all of our plants and medicines are really good for us. Um, Talk a little bit about preparing, how to prepare it, the different kinds of food that you could make with it, and then how it can be a healing tool for us. And then I want to tell a story that has ƞpsiła in it before I close for the evening. Next slide. So ƞpsiła, I don't even know if I want to try to pronounce that scientific word for it, the name for it. Pediomalum esculentum, I think. But it has been known by different names, and it grows all over in our area. I know up into probably North Dakota and Minnesota, all in the area here. It has been known before as breadroot or a prairie potato and a prairie turnip. And they're real good. They're real different from like the domesticated turnips, although I love those too. But these ones, they're kind of they're root foods, and so you have to really dig and know what to do with them. So when you harvest them, typically the harvest times for us around here was June to July. The most perfect times for to harvest them usually was when the flowers started to fade and then the leaves began to wither. So that was usually around June and July. Um, Today it seems different because it seems like the plants are starting to ripen earlier in the year. And I don't know if it's because of global warming or the changes in the environment or things like that. But I've been seeing people like on Facebook posting up their ƞpsiła that they've been able to get for the last maybe couple weeks. And so it's kind of interesting to see those changes from when I was younger to now and how much sooner we're able to harvest them. Um, but when you harvest the flowers, the plants, and you dig them up before you do that, some of the teachings that I had gotten was to give an offering to the plant because the plants are our relatives and we need to honor that they have a spirit and we need to honor that they are going to give themselves up so that we would have the nutrients we need from them. So my mom and my ina and my unjila, my grandmother, used to say to offer something to them. Sometimes people would offer tobacco to the plant and ask them permission to take them and thank them for letting us take them. Talk to them and thank them for providing us that nutrition, that food source that they provide for us. And so we would do that. But even if you don't have an offering, you offer a thanks, a wopila, a pilamayae to them, telling them that you're thankful for them to be there and that you hope that they would come back and continue to nourish um, us in the next coming year. And so you harvest them, you have to dig them, you have to kind of dig deep around them. And when you're done harvesting them, then you would take the flour and you would put it back into the ground. And so that some people say to do it different ways. Some say put the flour back into the hole upside down so that nobody's coming back around to try to dig up a plant that's already been taken. And then they say that because the flowers would start connecting with the earth and they would get ready for the next year. And some say just put them back in the ground with the flowers still up because the roots will gather from the flowers again into the ground. So I think it kind of depends on what you're taught. And I know that different places teach different things. There's different teachings and none of them are wrong. Everybody has their way of teaching how to do harvest and do different things. But one of the things that I was also taught was that when you harvest from an area, it usually takes those plants about 2 to 4 years again to reestablish themselves so that they would have a good crop when they mature again. So if you harvest in one area, then you probably wouldn't go back to that place for about a couple years to harvest from there again. And it's not hard around here because there's so much space where you could go to harvest at different places. And I've never really checked on, those times, those like the 2 to 4 years thing, because well, for one, I haven't harvested myself for a while. I usually have like the younger people that go out and harvest and bring it to me, and then I would trade them for something or whatever. So I have to admit, I haven't been out there for a while harvesting myself. And we used to go out and harvest them. And, um, the first thing we would do with the first plant we would pull is we would open it and eat it, and enjoy that earthy flavor that it has as a fresh ƞpsiƞna, as a fresh, food from the earth. And it's probably the best flavor that you could ever think of. And one thing about this plant was because it was so available, it was a staple during famine because a lot of times that's where you would use the ƞpsiឫna, the bulb, to turn it into like flowers and different things. And it was easy to store and keep for long periods of time. I have a braid that my mom had probably, I didn't even know how old it is because she passed away in 2014 and I still have it. And I know she had it before that. And so I used part of it. I didn't want to because it was a memory of her, but I used part of it. And so when I prepared it, I was thinking how amazing some of our plants are and how long they can stay in a state of dryness until we give it water again. So um, it was a really good staple for not only Native people, but any of the settlers that came into the area and they learned about it and they would use it for the hard times during famine or during the winter or whatever. Next slide. So doing research on ƞpsiឫna, I found out, and I had like find out because I became a diabetic in 2012 and it made me really look at different foods and different things in a whole different way. So I have to look at food as what is it going to do to my body? How is it going to affect my blood sugars? How is it going to do these things? How is it going to affect me basically? Because when you're a diabetic and you eat certain foods and you don't feel good, you don't feel good at all. Some of it makes you feel real tired and kind of sick. And knowing that ƞpsiឫna was a root food, that it might do that. But what I found out was that it's really good to eat because it will not raise blood sugars. It does not do anything to your blood sugars, even though it has carbs in it. But it also has protein. I think for one bulb, it has like 7% protein to it. It has like one bulb will contain, from what I've been able to see, about 20 calories. It contains different types of vitamins like C and B vitamins. It has some calcium, it has some magnesium. So all this stuff on there, it has trace minerals and it's zero fat. And so when you prepare it as a food, you can add fat to it too, because fat helps the energy levels if you're using like you like make the energy levels better for a food like ƞpsiƞna. And so one thing I always say about our natural foods is that they are probably the best thing we can do for our bodies. And so they're healthier, they're natural to us. Our bodies are already in tuned to these foods. And I know whenever I hear that our traditional foods are ready, they're ripe to be picked, I get all excited because then I think, well, now we can have this and then I can gather and prepare them and keep them for the winter so that whenever it's time to have, we're kind of snowed in or whatever, these foods give your spirit a really good feeling when you cook them and eat them too. So with ƞpsiƞna, I know I can eat them and I know that it won't do anything to affect my blood sugars. And that's something that I really, really like about it, because it's something that I can enjoy in my life. Next slide. So ways to prepare ƞpsiƞna. One of the things that I was always told is whenever you braid them or you peel them, don't wash them. Because if you wash them, because it comes, how all the dirt after you dig them up and stuff, when you wash them, it makes your ƞpsiṟna turn brown. And so I have the braids on here that I have. Those were braids that were done without washing them with water, and so they're still maintain their white that they were when they were opened up and out of the harvesting. And so you could braid them like those, like the ones that I have in the picture. And then the other things, because I use it for food, for different foods, for ceremonial purposes and just to feed my family or when we do dinners, community dinners or whatever, I cut them into slices and string them together so they're like round, they look like coins. And then I just string them together and then I'll hang them up. And then let them dry that way. And then when you're ready to use them, then you can just take them off the string and you can put them in the soup. And then you can cut into pieces and air dry them, like little chunks. So sometimes I'll cut them into like quarters, the coin sizes, I'll cut them into quarters and I'll lay them out and I'll let them air dry. And then I can store them. And then I grate them with a cheese grater and then I dry them that way too. And that one's for a specific purpose. I don't do that all the time, but I do that because it's for a specific ceremonial food. Next slide. So these are some pictures of the food that I prepare ƞpsiṟna in. So the top picture, the pink bowl is kanika or the tripe of a buffalo. And I put in the ƞpsiṟna into the soup and the dried corn. But before I put the ƞpsiṟna into the dried soup, I have to soak them. So the night before I'm gonna make the soup, I put the ƞpsiṟna into water and I soak it and I'll boil it for a little bit and then I'll let it soak and then I'll stick it in the refrigerator so it could continue absorbing the water from that boiling it. And then the next day, I'll put them into the soup with the meat and then the dried corn, and then I'll let it cook all day. Because if you have ever prepared ƞpsiƞna, you know it takes a long time for it to rehydrate. Um, and and when it does, though, it's like opening, it's like eating fresh ƞpsiƞna again. And so that's one way. The other way is in the big pot in the bottom, that's bapa, that's dried meat, dried buffalo meat, and dried corn. And then there's the little round pieces of ƞpsiឫna, those coin-like ones. Those are the ones I was talking about. I throw those in there with the corn. Those ones I don't have to soak overnight because the whole ones are the ones that take longer to rehydrate. So I'll put that in there and then I'll let that cook for about 6 hours in an electric roaster or whatever. And then they hydrate pretty fast because they're thinner and they're open. And so it hydrates, and then we add a little bit salt pork to it, the salt bacon, and then just let it cook. And that fat in the salt bacon, it kind of gives fat to because the buffalo meat is a little bit more lean and the carbs and all of that, and it gives it a flavor. And then in a little bowl, that's ƞpsiឫna, and that's one of our sacred spirit foods that we use for ceremony, for our Sundance tree. Um, and when I was taught by one of my unchilas, her name was Noreen Lonelk, it kind of was a 4-day process because when I first heard about this, I don't know how old I was. I think I was probably about 30 some years old because I make wasna different kinds, but I've never heard of ƞpsiឫna wasna. So she told me, Pakoja, come over and I'll teach you how to make that because she done that for a dinner, a ceremony they were having. And so I went over and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn really fast. And, you know, kind of being young, you get impatient about different things and all of that. So she made the ƞpsiឫna, she had me do it, and it was a 4-day process. And then I realized later it was a 4-day process because we had to rehydrate it. Then we had to let it dry out so it wasn't too wet. And then we had to prepare it, and then we had to make the wasna from it. And so we were able to do that. But this ƞpsiឫna wasna, you can that's why I grate it with a cheese grater because it makes it so much easier, so I don't have to go through that whole process of soaking. When it's fresh, I'll grate it and then let it dry like that. So whenever we need ƞpsiឫna wasna, then I'll have it ready in that fashion. That way I'll be able to just say, okay, here, let's go, let's make this, and I'll make the wasna. And you mix that with fat, kidney fat. I usually use kidney fat to mix with my wasnas, and you can add in anything you want in there. One of my mushkes does buffalo berries. When we have them, she'll put it in that ƞpsiឫna wasna. Sometimes you can add wild blueberries. You could add pitted choke cherries. You could add whatever you want into that ƞpsiឫna wasna. And I like to break the kidney fat down to where you get those little chunks of crisp fat, and then add it in, and then that becomes your ƞpsiឫna wasna. And that's one of our 4 wasna for ceremonial purposes. So I was always thankful for my grandma Noreen to teach me how to do that too, because I probably would have never known about it or been able to learn how to do it. Plus, her teachings gave me patience and taught me patience on taking time and listening and learning and not trying to rush a process that didn't need to be rushed. Next slide. Okay. So for me, I believe that what we do, anything we do that has to do with harvesting and food prep is healing. It's a healing tool for our people. And when you look at our lives, in our 4 quadrants of our life, in our Nagi, our spiritual self, in our Tacha, our physical self, our Woksape, our mental self, and our Tawachi, our emotional self, that you can look at what we do as healing, as a healing method. So when I think about the physical part of our lives, when you go out and harvest, there is a lot of movement. And a lot of times when they're harvesting ƞpsiƞna, if you've harvested it, you know how hard it can be. You have to carry your shovel, maybe someone has a tamper, you have to walk a long ways. And it's a lot of hard work and sometimes a lot of physical exertion. And then you're carrying bags of ƞpsiឫna with you as you're looking for more. And so that movement part is really good for the body and it gets you moving and it does it gets your endorphins going and your anticipation for what's to come with that ƞpsiឫna. And then you look at your mental health and in there, you're using your mind, you're using your eyes to look for the plants. It takes, because you're so focused on picking up, finding the plants and digging them and picking them, it takes your mind off of like the other world stressors, like what's happening at home or what's happening in the world. It takes your mind off of those stressors and it causes you to focus just on the harvesting and finding the plants that you're looking for and going and digging and getting those endorphins going with the physical exercise. And emotionally, when you look at that, you spend time with the people you're with, your loved ones. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your children, maybe it's your ƞpsiឫna or your tumi, whoever it is, you're spending time with them, you're building connection with them, with your loved ones, and you're connecting, you're visiting. Sometimes we would hear crazy stories from our aunties or, different ones, and there's a lot of laughter that goes with it. Probably a lot of cussing too when you can't dig up that one plant. But there's a lot of things that happen emotionally, and a lot of times, especially in times like now where things are so fast and we're uncertain about so many things, we need that connection and we need that time to clear our minds and our emotions from all of the stuff that goes on. And then the spiritual part of it, when you go out in nature, you're connecting with ƞpsiឫna and you have to offer those prayers. You offer tobacco or whatever it is you can. You talk with the plant. It's spirit. It's like your spirit is connecting with the plant spirits. And so you have that connection. And so you're able to enjoy and able to um, appreciate that plant for what it's going to provide for you and your family. So I always think that, you do that, and prepping food is the same way. Today, when I prep food, when I do the bapa, when I get the ƞpsiឫnas prepared, that's my meditation and my time to remember my connection to those who taught me who aren't here anymore, to those who I have memories with on that. And so anything we do in regards to our traditional food harvesting, food prep, that's healing for us. Next slide. Okay, about how much time do we have, Rebecca? Okay, I'm gonna read a story. This is a story. It says a story of Starboy, but it's the Wichinchila Shakoni story. Wichakbi Waslolia talks about stars and their connection with Earth. We tell a little story about a time when along the hillside, two young girls on a beautiful night, a warm summer night when the stars are like just hanging right above you, like when you can just see them right there and you feel like you can pick them out of the sky. And one young girl says, I would marry that star if I could. And the other girl says, I would marry that one. Late that evening, as they're going back down into their village, they meet two young men coming to meet them. The young men say, We heard you. We heard you saying that you would marry us. So we come here for you to marry and take you back to our world. And then they were transported back into the star world, where all their needs are met and where they had everything. The only thing they were told was that they cannot pick the ƞpsiឫna. You cannot pick that, they were told. The wild turnip that grows in the month of June is very delicious. So while they were living up there, one of the young girls sees the flower of the ƞpsiឫna and she longs for it. She misses that taste and she wants to taste it again, but she is forbidden to dig it. But she thinks to herself, they're not going to miss just one ƞpsiƞna. So she quickly digs out the ƞpsiƞna and opens a hole in the sky. And she looks down into that hole down below. She sees her village. She sees her grandmother, her siblings, her cousins, and she becomes very lonely and wants to go home. She thinks, I want to go home and I want to see grandma. Her loneliness is too strong, so she gathers more and more, hundreds and hundreds of ƞpsiឫna, and she braids them all together, making a long, long rope. She secures it and begins to climb down. She climbs down, but at a point before she reaches the earth, it breaks. And as she falls to the earth, she is killed. But she is carrying a baby. And the baby is born. And when that baby is born, the wolves, the animals come forth and proclaim that this is a very special child and has come from the stars, saying, we must take care of it. We must ensure that it lives. Meadowlark, magpie, you speak the Lakota language. You will be our translators. And they help the child to grow, and the little boy grows very quickly and becomes their cultural hero. He goes from village to help people when they have trouble. He comes to a village one day in the Black Hills, and there's a lot of sadness, so he pursues it. He asks what happened, and the people tell him there is this giant, ugly red bird that comes down from the mountain and has been taking our young girls and takes them up from the mountain, devours them. We've tried to kill it, but we can't seem to kill it. The young Starboy says, I will do what I can, and he successfully kills the big, giant red bird. But he tells the people, I cannot bring back to you the physical bodies of your 7 girls, but I will put their spirits in the constellation in the stars to remind you to be ever vigilant and to watch over your children. So we have that constellation called the Wichinchila Shakoi, the 7 little girls that exist in the stars today, to remind us to take care of our children, watch over them, and take good care of them. And that was a story that was told by Dwayne Howell Hornbear. And I want to thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you so much, Pidamayaye Ruth, for sharing your traditional knowledge. I really appreciated the reminder and the teaching of offering something to the plant relatives before harvesting them. And something that I learned was, well, I guess I knew that, but it was a good reminder about how our plant relatives are really good. Well, we were always really good food preservationists, and it probably really kicked in during hard times. And but I didn't know that or realize how long ƞpsiឫna is can be used. However long. So that was something that I learned. Thank you for sharing about yourself and all of your knowledge.
Thank you.
I just want to remind the audience that if you have questions for Ruth or for our next speaker, please add them to the Q&A section in the Zoom chat or in the Zoom webinar, I mean, and then type your questions in the Facebook live comment section. And we'll hopefully try to get to all the questions at the end. Our next speaker is Gabby Menomin. Gabby is an enrolled member of the Forest County Potawatomi community, Bullhead Clan of northern Wisconsin. Gabby has a master's degree in tribal natural resource management. She is focused on plant relatives and how climate change is impacting them. She is passionate about the environment and looking at how to center Indigenous voices, values, and knowledge in the stewardship of the land. You're on, Gabby.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Ruth, for those teachings. I'm going to be talking a little bit about like the ecology, just basic ecology. Full disclosure, I've never gotten to actually work too much with ƞpsiƞna or ƞpsiឫna. I've seen it only a handful of times, but hoping that I'll get some more experiences in the future with my husband and his family. So yeah, like I said, just going to do a little basic ecology for ƞpsiឫna. So let's go to the next slide. So the Latin name for ƞpsiឫna is Pediomelum agrophyllum. Oh, nope, sorry, that's the wrong one. Esculetum. Sorry, that was a big typo on my part. But some other common names that it goes by are prairie turnip or breadroot as well. ƞpsiƞna is part of the Fabaceae or the pea and bean family. Here in Minnesota, some of its closest relatives are, other relatives that are in the genus Pediomelum are the silverleaf scurf pea. They look very similar. That one has a little bit of a deeper purple flower, though. But other relatives that it has in the pea family that also live here in Minnesota are things like the ground plum, lots of different species of milk vetches, and prairie clovers as well, lead plant, mouse beans or hog peanut, and partridge pea, just to name a few. But there are so many different relatives that are closely related to ƞpsiƞna that live here in Minnesota, and then even more the further you go out. So generally speaking about the habitat, this is a dry prairie plant. It really loves dry soils, and it thrives in open field and prairie conditions as well. Generally, it really likes kind of more sandy or loamy or kind of a mixture of both soils. But like I said, this is a really you'll find it in very, very dry conditions. Because of that, it has a very high drought tolerance as well. So even though, we're experiencing, with climate change predictions, having more droughts here in the Midwest, especially, thankfully, ƞpsiƞna has those properties to be able to handle those more frequent and longer period drought conditions. And I just want to point y'all to the upper part, the map. That's kind of the range that it grows in. So kind of Minnesota here in the Twin Cities is kind of, generally speaking, its most eastern range that it grows. It can be found a little bit more in Wisconsin. And then you'll find it really a lot out west and down south as well. Let's go to the next slide. So I was super excited when I found out that we're going to be talking about ƞpsiƞna, because this is the first time that we're talking about a legume. And I really love legumes. And so I just wanted to share some little fun facts with y'all for why legumes are so important and why they're so unique and why they're one of my favorite plant families as well. So legumes are found in the Fabaceae family, or this pea and bean family. And so, some of those native plant species that I shared that are closely related to ƞpsiƞna here in Minnesota, ƞpsiƞna is also related to a number of different agricultural plants as well. And the Fabaceae family, aside from the grass family, is probably one of the most agriculturally important plants to people, just because of how much of our food system comes from that family. So, things like beans, peas, things like that. And so legumes are generally characterized as flowering plants that have compound leaves, meaning that one leaf looks like one leaf has many multiple leaflets on it. They also have unique fruiting bodies, usually in the shape of what you would think of like a bean pod, things like that. And legumes also have the ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen, so taking nitrogen from the air and putting it back into the soil. And they do this through a symbiotic relationship with fungi or bacteria in the soil, known as a mycorrhizal. So I just wanted to share that photo on the right. It's not ƞpsiƞna, but I just wanted to kind of show you kind of how that symbiotic fungi and root relationship kind of looks for some plants. Those kind of like denser white masses on the roots are nodules. And so ƞpsiƞna has that, also has that symbiotic relationship with fungi as well. Legumes also often contain high amounts of protein and fiber, which is part of the reason why they're so important in our food systems as well. And they can be anything from trees and shrubs to vines and herbaceous plants as well. Okay, next slide. So back to talking just about ƞpsiƞna. So I just wanted to walk through a little bit about how you can identify it. So this plant typically grows anywhere from like 12 to 16 inches tall. I've seen them a little bit shorter as well than 12 inches. I think it also just depends on kind of what year they're growing to. Like Ruth was talking about, they take a pretty long time to get established within the ecosystems that they're living in. So that kind of can play into the how tall they can grow each year. But generally speaking, in this upper left-hand corner, we have the leaf, which is a palmately compound leaf. So you kind of see it's kind of like palmately. I think of palmate as like, you know, like you're looking at your hand and you have your fingers. So the leaves are kind of outstretched, kind of like your fingers are. They are alternate on the stem. So, opposite leaf arrangement on a stem, they would be right across from each other. Alternate, they kind of stagger up like a ladder like that. And sorry, my son was trying to say hi. So yeah, alternate on the stem. And they can kind of look like, if you know what lupine is, they have very similar leaves to lupine or some of our clovers as well. And they have this almost blue-green color. The stems are going to be very, very fuzzy. You can see that in the upper middle photo there. Very hairy stems. And then maybe you're able to see the flower. I forgot that sometimes our speaker videos might get in the way. If you're able to see a good picture of the flower is also pretty fuzzy, and it has these beautiful pea-like bluish purple kind of flowers. I've seen some photos where it's like they're kind of this paler color, and sometimes they can get pretty deep, like a deeper purple color as well. Typically, they'll bloom in the late spring or early summer. I know my partner was telling me that he remembers they started blooming just before, sundances would start each year. Let's see. And then, okay, moving on to the bottom left-hand photo, we have the tuber or the root. So this is, they can come in a couple of different sizes. Generally speaking, they're about 2 to 4 inches long, kind of an inch wide, but obviously depending on soil conditions, how much harvesting has gone on in the area in the past, because harvesting is important for being able to aerate and kind of make some room in the soil. So that can kind of play into how big the tubers get as well. But generally speaking, they're going to have this pretty thick tuber shape to them. And they're going to be pretty starchy and bright white in the middle as well. Let's see. And then in the bottom middle photo, I had a really hard time getting photos of this. Apparently not too many people take photos of the seed pods, but this is kind of what the seed pods look like. After the flower has been pollinated and it's getting ready to release its seeds, it has these small oval seed pods, and each seed pod contains 1 to 2 seeds. And I'm just showing a photo on the bottom right hand about how small those seeds are. I think that's comparing it to a dime. So yeah, each of those seed pods has 1 to 2 of these teeny tiny little seeds. And one cool fact about the seed dispersal method of ƞpsiƞna, this is a wind dispersed seed. And, I wouldn't think of that looking at the seeds. They look like, not typically what I would see wind dispersed seeds being, something like a cottonwood where it has this like fluffy little bit on it to carry the seed. But the wind dispersal method is very similar to tumbleweed, where after the ƞpsiƞna has been pollinated and it gets into the seed pod stage and it's ready to release its seeds, it kind of breaks off from the ground and is blown away by the wind, and those seeds are carried and spread as it's kind of like tumbling over the ground. This was super cool. Like I said, I was really amazed when I was reading about the seed dispersal method. So I just wanted to share that with y'all too. All right, next slide. And then I just want to share some of the kinship roles that ƞpsiƞna has, both with other wildlife, and then we'll get into the kind of ecological kinship as well after this. So the flowers are really important for our pollinators, especially our native pollinators. Sorry about that. So yeah, the flowers are really important for our native pollinators. Some native pollinators here in Minnesota that will feed off of ƞpsiƞna flower and nectar are things are relatives like the American bumblebee, Bombus pennsylvanicus, which is actually an endangered bumblebee species as well. And then other bumblebee species like brown-belted bumblebee that you see in the bottom left-hand corner. Oh, sorry, that American bumblebee is that upper left-hand photo. And then another bumblebee species you'll also commonly see them on, see visiting is the common eastern bumblebee as well. And then, of course, the tubers are a super important food source for a number of different animal species. Small mammals, large mammals, things like that. Bison will forage off of them. Prairie dogs, both of these are more out west, rather here than in Minnesota typically. Sorry about that again. And then also prairie chickens out west a little bit more too. But here in Minnesota, you'd see things more like squirrels, rabbits, maybe some small rodents like voles, things like that, that would forage and eat the tubers as well. And I forgot to write this down here, but the seeds are also foraged by some species of birds and some small rodents as well. All right. I think we'll go on to the next slide. So here are some of the ecological kinship roles that ƞpsiƞna has with the broader environment that it lives in. So you'll find it, like I said in the beginning, you'll find them in dry prairie conditions and habitats. And so some other common species, at least here in Minnesota, that you'll see growing with ƞpsiƞna are things like lead plant, that silverleaf scurf pea, partridge pea. These are all legumes as well, closely related to ƞpsiƞna. And then you also see some of our native grasses like big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass, and then some of our native wildflowers here in Minnesota, other native wildflowers like the paskflower, butterfly weed, prairie violets, blazing stars. And my partner told me this, he grew up in Oglala, and so he saw ƞpsiƞna growing alongside yucca as well quite often. That's a little bit more out west rather than here in Minnesota. Other ways that ƞpsiƞna is important to the environments and the ecology that it lives within, it's really important for stable soil stabilization, especially in the prairie ecosystems that it lives in. This just has to do with its tuber and its root system being able to hold in soil and help prevent things like erosion, things like that. Let's see, and then ƞpsiƞna is also able to support those microfaunal communities because of their ability to form those symbiotic relationships with different mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria, which help put nitrogen back into the soil, which is really important for soil fertility in prairie ecosystems. And because of this, they're able to help support more biodiversity in the prairie ecosystems that they're in. And ƞpsiƞna is a great indicator species for healthy prairie ecosystems. So if you're seeing this growing in the prairie, you know that the soil is healthy, it's doing good, and it's able to help support the other relatives that it's living with as well. Okay, next slide. So some threats to ƞpsiňna. Probably the biggest one has to do with habitat loss. Specifically habitat loss due to agricultural expansion and prairie conversion as well. So you can see that in that upper left-hand photo. just kind of, I just wanted to give the comparison between, you know, what agricultural land looks like versus a pretty healthy prairie ecosystem. More than likely, this is a buffer around some farmland, which thankfully we're seeing a little bit more of in modern day agricultural practices, is using prairie systems as buffers, but still just wanted to give that comparison. Another thing that's impacting or threatening ƞpsiƞna is things also related to agriculture, but overgrazing by livestock, which can reduce its populations where it's growing. And then things like invasive species. I have a photo of the bottom left hand is smooth brome, and then the bottom right hand is Kentucky bluegrass. These are both invasive species that are common, you'll commonly find taking over prairie systems, especially. And really the biggest issue with these two species and ƞpsiƞna is that they will outcompete ƞpsiƞna and kind of take over and kind of kick it out of the places that it's living in. Um, another another threat is fire suppression as well. So I wanted to show a photo of kind of what fire suppression can do to a prairie ecosystem. Prairie systems being fire dependent habitats, mainly because, you know, fire is able to keep out some of those woody plants. So you can kind of see a prairie ecosystem here that's being taken over by, it looks like juniper. So that's just an example of how fire suppression can lead to more woody plants growing in a prairie ecosystem, which again leads to more competition, things like that. And then the last one is disease. So the biggest kind of disease concern with ƞpsiƞna are things like root rot. And, you know, this can be, this is generally due to things like if they're receiving too much water and there's poor drainage in the soil, but then also fungal pathogens such as phytophthora and Pythium, I believe they're both called. These are both two common fungal infections that can be found in ƞpsiƞna when it gets in these kind of like wetter conditions. And I don't have a slide for this, but I did just want to briefly kind of talk about how you can kind of grow your own ƞpsiƞna based off of kind of some research that I was doing online. And I know from other people that I've talked to that have tried to bring back ƞpsiƞna and actually were successful bringing back ƞpsiƞna, but I won't mention who specifically. But they mentioned how difficult it was to get ƞpsiṟna established in their kind of like prairie restoration projects, and trying to think about how can we better like reduce mortality for like new plantings, or how can we help the seeds germinate a little bit better. And so some things that I was reading up on, scarification kind of can work sometimes. People use like the sandpaper method, so just trying to kind of rub down that seed coat on the ƞpsiṟna seeds so that they're able to germinate a little bit better. But I saw quite a few people say that the best method that they found is actually putting the seeds in the freezer and then taking them out of the freezer, pouring boiling water on them and letting it kind of go back to room temperature, and then planting those seeds. I've seen a lot of people say that they had a lot of success with that germination method as well. But also something that I've been thinking of is the mycorrhizal relationship that ƞpsiṟna has when it's an adult plant. And so how can we use different species of mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria, make inoculums and put them into the soil. I know there's new and emerging research on soil inoculums for prairie habitats, so I'm hoping to see more definitive answers in the future. I would love to be able to see kind of the results of those someday. But I just wanted to share that with y'all because I've heard other people have issues growing this plant, and you know, maybe if other people are also able to find some better ways to grow it, and we can all share with each other. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to me today. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that ƞpsiƞna was a legume. That also made me excited, and I can see the excitement on Gabby's face. And didn't realize that ƞpsiƞna was the BNRP, part of the BNRP family. So that was something that I learned. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. I think Ruth had another traditional story that she wanted to share. So we'll bring her back in, and then she'll share her last story, and then we'll get into the Q&A.
Oh, I shared this story already.
You shared the story? Okay.
Yeah, that was the story I told. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, well, if Gabby and Ruth, you want to turn your cameras back on, and we'll just get straight to the questions. So we don't have any Facebook Live questions. For both Gabby and Ruth, what does ƞpsiła taste like? Does it taste like a regular turnip or a potato?
Well, I can't really describe the taste. It tastes earthy for sure. And but it's so delicious, and it's that kind of thing that when you eat it, your spirit gets happy. And the only thing I can say is when you try it, you have to try it yourself. You know, you have to taste it, peel a fresh one, and then just bite into it, and it's just so good. But for a description of what it tastes like, I can't really describe it.
That's exactly how I would describe it, as earthy. Gabby, have you ever had ƞpsiła?
I've never had it fresh, but I've had it in soup quite a few times. And the best way I can describe it in soup is it's got this fresh, crisp taste to it. That's the best way I can describe it. And I tried asking my husband if he could describe what it tastes like too, and he was just like, I don't know, it just tastes like ƞpsiła. That's all I can say about it. So
Ruth, well, and you kind of answered this in your first question, or in your other first answer, but can it be eaten raw like Jamaica? And you said you just, as soon as you get it out of the ground, you just take a bite out of it, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most favorite parts of it when we get it. And my son's like, help me peel it because it is hard to open. It's tough. It's like tearing leather, trying to tear leather open sometimes. But you can eat it. It's kind of it's like a texture you have to chew it, kind of tough. And the center of it, sometimes you can't bite through it, but you can definitely eat it and as raw. So
Thank you. I don't know if this might be a question for both of you. Can the pods or seeds be cooked to eat, like beans or peas or edamame?
I haven't ever tried it. I haven't even ever seen a bean or one of the pods.
Mm.
yeah, I'm not too sure about that one.
Maybe we'll have to test it out.
This year we're gonna have to find some and see. I do
Yeah.
know like some other plants like choke cherries, the seed can be poisonous. But I don't know like these other plants, I don't know because I've never tried to eat the seeds or anything. Pods.
Thank you. Couple more questions. How long will it live if it's not dug up? Can it be grown in a garden, perennial, like a perennial?
Yeah, so I did forget to mention that it is a perennial, so they can, I don't know about the lifespan, but I think as long as you have that healthy prairie ecosystem, they can live a really long time. They'll keep coming back each year.
Has anyone tried tissue culture for propagation? Used for orchids, which are also hard to grow from seed without mycorrhizae? Mycorrhizae?
Mycorrhizae. Yeah, so I haven't heard about tissue culture for propagation. I do know that you can actually, yeah, I do know that you can do like a bare root transfer. So like digging up that tuber and that root system when it's dormant, and then replanting it elsewhere. I know that's something that you can do with this.
Thank you. And then again, Ruthie, I think you answered this. Do you peel it before braiding or eating?
For sure, or you'll break some teeth.
And then what's your favorite way to prepare ƞpsiƞna?
Well, for me, it's every way that I can prepare it, but the end result always is when it's in a pot of some type of soup. It just adds to the flavor of the soup. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very, very, very much. Oh, one more question. A couple more questions just popped up. Um, what do you peel it with?
Um, We usually have like a knife, like a paring knife, something sharp that can kind of cut through between the long stem, and then you can pull it if you're strong enough. I know with me now I can't do it, so I have my big sons do it for me. But you can get that open and then peel it open. Sometimes it takes two pieces, and sometimes it takes more than two pieces to get it fully open. So, and then you got to pull it off the root and stuff. So.
Curious if there are uses for the seeds other than growing more, since usually with legumes, we use the seeds. Also, if the nodules are seen or interacted with when harvesting the root.
So I can answer the question about the nodules because I'm not too sure about the seeds at all. But with the nodules, they're gonna sometimes they're not as pronounced as with other plant species. You'll see these like really big white nodules. Those that I've seen, it's a little more like it looks like tiny clumps of dirt attaching itself. Those are kind of those nodules that you'll see. They are kind of hard to see though. Sorry, my son's here.
Um, can you guys remind us if you can share where they can be found?
Well, in our area, you could just walk anywhere along the hills, the prairies. They're just everywhere. And so you can walk and you look, gotta just look for the plants, the flowers, and find them. Sometimes it's harder. And I had a elderly man tell me, go out at sunrise and walk along the hill and you'll be able to see them. And then somebody else said, well, I was told by another elder to do it at sunset, is to walk along and you'd be able to see them better. So I didn't know, because I know when you go out and you could probably just see them anyway, but it's just a lot of searching no matter what.
Abby, do you want to answer? Do you have an answer?
Yeah, so speaking about its like general native range, so you'll find it as far east as Minnesota, and then as far west as like Montana, and you'll find it kind of north into Canada a little bit, all the way south into some parts of Texas. So that's kind of its native range. Pretty big, middle part of the United States, basically.
Um, so it sounds like folks are interested in harvesting and a field trip. And so maybe that means a future hike and harvest coming up, maybe. Okay, no more questions have popped up. Does either of you have anything else you want to share? Otherwise, that is it for the webinar. Thank you guys. I appreciate both of you so much. Thank you, Ruthie. This was kind of last minute, and I appreciate your availability and being so flexible and sharing all of your knowledge. And thank you, Gabby, for being a plant wizard or in-house plant wizard. And I appreciate you, like I said, and I appreciate the audience and everyone for being here and all of the questions. Great questions. Thank you for sharing traditional stories. We have our grand opening in October, so we don't have a set date for our next GOPIN webinar or Gifts of the Plant Nation webinar. So please stay tuned, watch for our newsletters, watch our socials, wakantipi awayankapi. But thank you all. I hope everyone has a good evening. Dokshake.